Oh yeah, but I'll just laugh.
I have always been hooked on sport from a really young girl. I grew up in a very active family. I remember watching the Olympics on telly, and I remember just thinking, I want to be world and Olympic champion. I get asked so many times what it felt like, and it's so hard to articulate and put into words. But I just remember crossing the line and thinking, you've done it. I have always been hooked on sport from a really young girl. I grew up in a very active family. My dad actually competed in 2 Winter Olympic Games in '84 and '88 as a biathlete, skiing and shooting. He was in the army, and then he went on a ski trip and he thought it was downhill, but it turned out to be cross country. He was good at it, so ended up in the Olympic team. I actually never knew about that as a child. He never spoke about it. There was never anything up on the wall. But as I got older, then obviously it came out and he told me all about his career. And I think from a really young age, I was just obsessed with sport. I did everything and anything under the sun that you can think of, from trampolining, gymnastics, hockey, football, swimming, and I just loved it. And I remember watching the Olympics on telly or watching professional sport on telly, and I remember just thinking, I want to be world and Olympic champion. And I didn't care what sport it was in. I was just so competitive, so disciplined as well. When I was 14, British cycling came into my school. It was a sports college, so I think that's how our school was selected to be part of the talent team. I was in a maths lesson at the time, so as a sports enthusiast, would have done anything to get out of maths. I'd never ever competed on a bike before. I had a kid's mountain bike. We'd go out on family bike rides, but that's about as much as it was for me. There were 3 tests. So the first test was on the school playing field. So they did an endurance test around the 400-metre track and then a sprint test up the 100-metre track. I got invited to do some more scientific testing. So they brought what bikes into the school where they could look at more power data. I got through that round of testing. And then the third round, looking back now, I believe they put in place to test mental capabilities, whether you're up for the challenge. It was a mountain bike ride, so my parents had to take me somewhere. So that was almost a test in itself. Were my parents up for, supporting what could be a long journey? And I must have enjoyed it because I got then a letter home saying you've got into the talent team. And I think because I was identified as having talent, that also sparked me into thinking, well, this maybe could be something that I could go on to do long term. So then, a lot of ups and downs throughout the first few years of being within British cycling. I actually started out on, obviously, the talent team. I actually got identified as having sprinting talent. So Ian Dyer, who was the sprint coach at the time, must have seen me racing and thought I had a turn of speed. We want to try her on the Olympic development programme for sprint. I did a year on the sprint squad with the likes of Jess Varnish, Becky James or Becky North now, Victoria Pendleton, but I just got my head kicked in and it was really not enjoyable. But then I actually went back onto the endurance squad, but because I'd spent a year only sprinting, when I went back onto the endurance squad, again, I got my head kicked in. And that's where I think the first really hard part of my career came, because I applied for the academy and I didn't get on 2 years in a row. And I actually got told by one of the British cycling coaches that I'd never be good enough and I would never make it as a cyclist. And I don't know where really the determination came from to keep going was, but I think in the back of my mind, I just still had this dream of becoming an Olympic and world champion, having that support system at home, which I definitely wouldn't have made it if it wasn't for that. I really, truly believe. That coincided with meeting Matt. Matt's dad was obviously a very well-known coach. He coached me while I was off the British cycling system. We had through this time I also had glandular fever, so I went through a period of not being able to ride. When I did recover from it, I had I think it was around 8 weeks till the national championships, where I could essentially go up alongside all of the girls that were already in the British cycling system and try and beat them and try and force my way back into the squad. And this was one of my last chances to do this before London 2012. So I was training 3 times a day, trying to trick my body into thinking there were more days in the week, doing these really short, specific sessions. And I went up to Manchester, raced, medalled in every event that I entered, and a few days later got an email from Paul Manning, who was the endurance coach, saying, do I want to come up to Manchester to try out for the team pursuit? So I was initially driving myself up to Manchester once a week on my own. I'd do a couple of training sessions over the course of the 2 days with the girls that were already on the squad. And it was daunting going into the track, because I remember all the other girls were living in, the halls in Fallowfield, or they had their own places in Manchester, and they were very secure within that kind of squad. And I was almost like the girl coming in, trying to get myself into this team. Then by 2011 in March, I was part of the World Championships team in Apeldoorn that won the World Championships. I got invited to go up and live in Manchester, be part of the squad. And that's where it became what I call an X Factor elimination process. So there were 12 of us that started on this journey. And after each major competition from that first World Championships in Apeldoorn, 1 or 2 riders were told, right, that's the end of the journey. You're not going to make it to the London Olympics. And I cannot imagine what that must have felt like for those girls. For us, it was just that selection part of the whole process that was so difficult, because we were trying to be a team, the best team we could be. It was so much about trust that we were just forming these relationships. And I think that is really why myself, Laura Trott, Laura Kenny now, of course, and Joanna Rousel were the best team, because we had so much trust in each other. We weren't told who was riding the first round, so there's 3 rounds within the Olympic Games until a week before, the second round until the night before, and the final of the Olympics half an hour before, which again, I just remember we did the first round, we broke the world record, so should have been absolutely buzzing. And I remember looking straight down at Dave Brailsford, Shane Sutton, and Steve Peters, a psychologist, who were the 3 that really worked together on the selection process of each round. Thankfully, it stayed the same throughout. 4th of August, which ended up being Super Saturday, we won the Olympic gold medal. I get asked so many times what it felt like, and it's so hard to articulate and put into words the sheer joy of crossing that. I was only 21 at the time, so young, but I just remember crossing the line and thinking, oh, we've done it, it was just incredible. There's a huge relatability from, I guess, becoming Olympic champion to how I live my life now. When I was riding, I was very performance driven. There were times where I didn't really enjoy what I was doing, especially the long rides. That would be the worst thing for me. I'd never really look around me at my surroundings. I'd never stop at the cafe. But now, as much as there is discipline there, I've got goals that that I'm working towards, whether it be for running or cycling. I feel so lucky to be able to do what I'm doing, to set an example for my children. That's a huge one for me. But I know the benefits, both physiologically and, from a psychological point of view, a mental health point of view, of exercise. And it's a huge part of my life and who I am. I'm addicted to exercise in the best way, I think, actually in a healthy way. I don't have to exercise every day, but when I do exercise, I feel so much better. Being part of the LeBlanq family, I go out in the LeBlanq laps, or when I was in Ibiza and I'm talking to people next to me. When I used to ride or train as a professional athlete, I didn't used to do that because I was just in this bubble of performance. And now for me, I'm getting so much more out of exercise because of that, because it's so much more than how fast I'm running or how hard I'm going on the bike. Yes, I still go hard, don't get me wrong. I'm very motivated, I'm still very disciplined, and I love hurting myself, but there's also such an enjoyment element to it, which is the most important thing for me. I know that I'm not a full-time cyclist now. I'm a mum, I work. So for me now, it's just about fitting in what I can every day. It's a balance. Matt, my husband's obviously working. So between us, it's kind of all about that teamwork and figuring out at the start of a week where our slots are to train and what that looks like. Every week is different. I've signed up to London Marathon, so that's a journey for me at the moment. It's also very time efficient for me running. I can take my trainers anywhere. And then riding, I think it's always going to be in my heart, and I really love it now, quite different to when I was riding professionally. And I'm loving kind of exploring that journey as to, where do I get that the most out of? Riding with people, riding in groups. It might be a chain gang or, a Sunday group ride that I can be a part of. And again, creating that community, which is something that's important to me too, because I love talking. So my role as Joyride coach, which I'm very excited about, by the way, is to help people get more out of their joyriding experience. I believe that by creating plans and giving people an accountability, a structured training plan to follow in the lead up to Isle of Wight Festival or Ibiza. Being in the best shape on the bike as you can be will mean that people will have a better experience because they won't be suffering as much, and they'll also get that sense of achievement having followed such a structured plan. I'll be creating 12-week plans for every group, so green, blue, red and black. They will all be tailored specific training plans for each group depending on the level of the rider. They will be specific. They will have on-bike and off-bike sessions every single week. We'll progress over a 3-week period, so it will be 3 weeks of progression and 1 week of rest or recovery, and then that last week within that 12-week block will be a taper into the event, so that you come up to the event and you're fresh and ready to go. And for me, giving back is just something that I'm really passionate about doing now. I feel lucky from the kind of the journey that I had, the best coaches in the world. I feel like I've learned so much about how to get the best out of people in whatever capacity that they're in. If they're just learning to ride a bike again after years and years of not riding a bike, getting cleats on their bike, setting up yourself to be comfortable on the bike, I can help with that. Or if you're looking at the black group, which would be your more serious rider, potentially a racing cyclist, to use power, to use heart rate data, to have those kind of real zoned training elements to what they're doing and what they're working towards. Again, just to be able to improve. And when someone's improved, that gives me so much joy because I've essentially been part of that. So as a parent now, if my children came to me and said, I want to be a professional sports person, one, I'd say it's really hard, but two, I'd encourage it. If that is what they want to do, ultimately, I want them to do whatever makes them happy and whatever they want to do. And when it comes to discipline, it has to come from them. And I think that's clear to see. Even now, when I look at my children, I can see the sports that they may or may not get into just down to how they enjoy it and how they get stuck in. But yeah, ultimately I want them to be happy. But if they want to be a pro cyclist, then I'll help them in every way that I can.
Perfect.